Welcome everybody, good afternoon. I think the cannon's gone off, so, and welcome to you, Minister. Thanks for joining us. I know you've got an incredibly hectic program with the elections around the corner, and great to have you with us, and great to have this amazing crowd. I mean, it's nice to know that two sort of let's just say sort of two bald, bearded guys can still have some pulling power in our dotage. But the Minister was saying, you know, everybody's sort of coming up, Derek, you must find sounds, but ill-mannered children here. Hey, Derek. Yeah. If you know, please, just mind your P's and Q's. So last year at the SATSA conference, we were hoping to have a session like this. So rather than the Minister, you know, give a speech or myself, you know, give an intro, just to have an informal chat and to really pick the Minister's mind on matters tourism and you know, where the country's going to on a broader level. He wasn't able to be at that meeting. He was called away by the President for a very important meeting with the Chinese Premier. But we managed to film it. We aired it at the conference, and it actually, I think, went down really well. So it's just a treat for us to have you in person, Minister, and to just have an opportunity to reflect back on your term, a punctuated term, as we know. But we were really glad that you came back and at least were able to see this sort of period out. So kicking off, I mean, looking back on your term, I think many would sort of say I mean, it actually happened to me. I was in Ireland going from Cork to Kilkenny, and I went to ask for directions, and the guy said, "Well, I wouldn't start from here." So the minister got appointed at exactly the same time as the whole visa and unabridged birth certificate issue sort of unfolded. And I remember flying down with the chairman of the Tourism Business Council at the time, Mavuso Msimang and June Crawford, and we met at a restaurant. I hadn't seen the minister for about 15 years. We worked closely together in food and agriculture in my previous life when I was at the Premier Group, and even before that when I worked for the union movement. So, but it was an inauspicious beginning, and I think in many ways is sort of, in a sense, characterised your term as tourism minister. But there's been a whole lot of other stuff that I think has transpired. So, you know, if I had to say to you, sort of looking back on your term, what would be the highlights? What would be the things that you're proud of and that we can, you know, sort of hold up and you know, reflect on?
These are your members?
These are my members.
Your mentors?
These are my mentors. And they probably are fellow travellers as well. So SATSA is now, we've been, and perhaps I should have mentioned it, very fortunate that SATEC has merged into SATSA. And we now have 1,172 member companies who are members of the SATSA SATEC fold.
I wasn't asking you for a speech, I'm just asking you if these are your members.
I'm a disciplined comrade, you know, that's a disciplined answer.
The nice thing is I kind of glance over the audience and walking in here that I know so many people here, and maybe that brings me to what stands out for me over the last 5 years. I think it's just this interaction with the industry. It's been great, and getting to know people, great people in this industry. Well, not all of you, but most of you. Most of you. And I think, you know, starting with yourself, David, I mean, I think, you know, met with you immediately. Yes, it was a difficult start, but for me, working with people in the industry to work through these problems together, that was a good thing, because they were very real problems. It wasn't just walking into the unabridged birth certificates, but it was also walking into Ebola. Yeah. So it was a double whammy, if you recall, in 2015, and probably the biggest negative impact came from Ebola, because I think the impact of the unabridged birth certificates requirement, I think that was still to come. Ebola, that we had absolutely nothing to do with. We didn't have a single case of Ebola, but it knocked us, bang. And it says a lot about on the one hand, we know about the resilience in tourism, but it's also the vulnerabilities. You know, little things can knock quickly, as the drought knocked Cape Town. But Highlight for me, David, one of them is the working with the industry, and working well with the industry. A little bit of a gap that I had, a little sabbatical period, and that broke a bit of the momentum, because I think we were starting to make real progress, and there was a halt, which was unfortunate. I think then Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa dealing with the visa issue, there was an interministerial committee. We had our own little committee, if you recall, looking at what kind of changes, and then it came to a halt. Luckily, it's back on track again, but with still lots of challenges. The other thing is, I think, reflecting on some of the things that have happened over the last 5 years. I think the one big thing was again, in a very participatory manner, the national tourism sector strategy. Because I think that gives a kind of a framework to say, focus your mind, 5 pillars, we can rattle them off. We can say marketing, destination development, visitor experience, ease of access, transformation, bang. But one without the other doesn't really work. So I think that was a very important part, that we have a good, well-considered sector strategy, and the various components we've been working on together. On the improving visitor experience, clearly we still have a long way to go, but I think some very, very nice projects have happened over the last while in terms of destination improvement, and I think all of these project launches are really exciting. The most recent one was in Cape of Gallas, fabulous map of Africa at Cape of Gallas if you haven't been there yet. But I mean, these are making our destination better. And then, without wanting to go accusing you of getting into speeches, and without wanting to make a speech, I think the introduction of the tourism incentive program and the various components of it, I think for me that was another highlight. The very fact that here at the WTM Africa, we've got the so-called little gems, SMMEs, and that's part of the market access, part of the tourism incentive program, which enables them to be here. They'll be at Indaba, they've been at international trade shows. So I think these are all advances, and good advances. The green incentive, you can go to Robben Island now and you'll find the solar panels there. That was a program of the National Department of Tourism. On the marketing side, well, I don't want to say the highlight was when I included David Frost. That's what he wants me to say. When I more recently, ended my term by appointing David Frost on the board, I'm confident, David, that you'll bring it that extra oomph. So I think altogether we could have achieved more during these 5 years, but there were some great moments. It's been a great experience. We know that the numbers are not what they should be. So as we enter the next 5-year period, we've got to very clinically identify what are the things that we have to do to get the numbers up again.
And I mean, if we reflect back on that sort of period, is there anything you would have possibly liked to have done differently, or that we could have done perhaps a little bit better, that might sort of inform where we take things going forward? Well, it's a bit of a difficult one. I mean, like sort of exit interview. We don't want you to go there.
Yeah, what would I have done differently? I think the factors that led to my sabbatical, I would like to have had that happen earlier. not my sabbatical, but I think we have grappled with challenges, and we can't say they don't impact on tourism. So, problems of state capture and corruption, etc. I'm not here to speak about that. But, when things impact on the economy, they impact on tourism. So I think the good news is that sort of towards the end of the 5-year term, we're getting out of it. Good news is that we have a vibrant democracy. You asked me if I would do anything differently. It's a bit difficult to say, because I think we did what we were able to do at the time to put the pieces in place. So nothing sort of, maybe you guys can tell us what you would have done differently if you had been the Minister of Tourism.
No, that's absolutely fair enough. I think totally circumscribed by events, but I think credit to you in terms of certainly the the whole trajectory and the way of working together that we put in place, I think, has been absolutely exemplary. And I think that puts us in a, it doesn't mean we've sorted everything out, but we're certainly in a place to have the right conversations and to come up with the right answers. Just on, and I know a lot of people in the room, just in terms of an update, because the whole issue of, let's take the unabridged birth certificates first, that still seems to be unresolved, and there still seems to be a bit of a disjuncture between what Home Affairs is saying and what tourism, I think, is saying and possibly would like to see. But perhaps you could just give us a sense of where that is and where you expect that to end.
Yeah, let me start with the travelling requirements for minors, not so much unabridged birth certificates, but that's what it was at the time. No, it was. And it became known, that became the nomenclature, how are we dealing with this unabridged birth certificate requirement, somebody here just told me a moment ago about a really bad experience in München, flying from London to München to South Africa, and an experience that ought not to be happening, that had nothing to do with Home Affairs, that had everything to do with the airlines. So the airlines and IATA has been quite slow, quite frankly, David. So what we've got on the 1st of December, finally, after this kind of long-running battle, we got the revised regulations gazetted. And then Home Affairs, to all of our disappointment and irritation, put out a advisory they call it, and got it wrong, just got it wrong. So their own advisory didn't reflect what their own regulations said. So that caused a lot of confusion. And then now more recently, I think the IATA had to then, they corrected it, by the way, after a long battle. 23rd of March, a new advisory is put out correcting it. So that side is done. But yet, like last week, people arrive in München and they're told by, I think, Lufthansa that they have to have the following documentation. IATA, until quite recently, had not sent out the information, and when they did very recently, it still says that if you're traveling with, if you're a single parent, by the way, traveling with both parents, you need nothing. We know that. Traveling with one parent from one of the visa-exempt countries, or one adult, you're advised to carry certain documentation in order to prove the relationship. What does IATA do? You must carry documentation. So it's wrong. The intention is that in order to combat possible child trafficking, and we know that there was a hype around it which was completely sort of based on a myth, but nonetheless, child trafficking does happen, human trafficking does happen. In order to prevent it, as smuggling of all sorts of things does happen, not everyone smuggles, but you've got to have ways of checking. So in the event that there could be a case of human trafficking or child trafficking, if there is suspicion, the immigration officer can stop you and say, but there seems to be something wrong here. Could you prove the relationship? There's a Mr. Frost traveling with somebody that seems to come from Vietnam, and please could you explain what your relationship is between yourself and the child? And Mr. Frost, because there is that advisory, has been advised, says, here we are. This is the letter of consent from the parent, but it's an advice that you get. And the intention is that the immigration officers would only ask for it if there are grounds for suspicion. That's what it is.
Yeah. So, any timelines on getting total clarity?
You say no. I'm catching.
They're asking for the birth certificate of minors traveling with one parent. That was last week to me.
Home Affairs, immigration officer.
Yeah. And they use this as a, you have this, and then they put people through absolute terror to try and mark their territory. I don't know what it is. And to come up that, and I think it's terrible. Well, terrible. And there were two women on the same flight that had exactly the same issue with immigration.
Okay, so we have thank you. So we have a challenge with the airlines, because the airlines are still demanding it, which is not right. And we have a challenge of the immigration officials seeming not getting it. And so, that needs attention. And they've got to get that message. And so wherever I find myself, and I know it's going to be one of your questions, wherever I find myself in a few weeks from now, I will really push for proper training of the immigration officials. Because you can have a good advisory, you can have good regulations, and you can do the right things, but if the immigration officials don't know what the right things are, you're still going to have the problem. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Minister. And then, just moving on slightly, the whole sort of visa regime and the move to possible e-visas, where is that process? I mean, we were sort of informed that there's a pilot happening with New Zealand. At what? Just some sort of sense of sort of timing on this whole issue, because clearly it's one of those inhibitors that if we can get right and possibly get some visa waivers from some of the EU countries that are still required to produce visas, the UAE, and just some of these sort of no-brainer markets. Obviously, we could sort of boost our numbers in the short term.
Absolutely. David, what is a no-brainer to you and me and to everyone here isn't necessarily a no-brainer to some other people elsewhere.
Yeah.
But I can only tell you what I've been told, and I can tell you what we're pushing for. So I can tell you where there are real advances, and I can tell you where we are engaging in order to achieve the advance. So, and what the intention is. But whether it's going to happen as planned is a different matter. I know that once you exercise your democratic right to vote on the 8th of May and you vote for Cyril Ramaphosa as president, I know that's what you are going to do, aren't you? Now you leave me wondering. Whoever you vote for, I think when the president assumes office for next 5-year term, I'm utterly convinced that he's going to be pushing this and pushing it hard. He's said it many times and has to push it. But at the moment where it stands is that he has said that we need to move to a world-class online visa system. At the moment where it stands, the pilot was going to be done with New Zealand, and as far as I know, it's ready to roll, the pilot. The next stage is to be a pilot, a kind of a next stage pilot with India, China, and a few other countries. And so that's the next stage. That's on the e-visas. On the visa waivers, we have submitted, but in consultation, as you know, David, with yourself and the TBCSA, a list of countries that we think ought to be considered for waivers. The list of countries, the 19 countries that were announced, quite frankly, are fairly insignificant to tourism. And it hasn't happened yet, even with those countries. So we think that there are a number of countries where we don't believe that there are serious security concerns, that visa waivers ought to happen, so we've submitted that list of countries. So 1, advancing towards e-visas. 2, having waivers for certain countries, which we're pushing for. And 3, the proposal from our side, actually, which was made publicly by Minister Gigaba, if you recall, in a press interview early last year, in our first interaction after my sabbatical, he said that we will consider recognition of the Schengen, US, and UK visa as sufficient to enter South Africa, a still valid visa from those countries. Now that would make a huge difference, because that would be effectively the many travelers coming to South Africa with those still valid visas in their passports wouldn't even have to do the e-visa application. So we're still pushing for that, and we hope we can achieve that. So it's a kind of a package of measures, but we're advancing. We are advancing towards a much more visa-friendly dispensation.
Right. And then the last sort of negative thing, and then we can get onto, is the whole National Public Transport Regulator story, which is sort of unfortunately dragged on for, I know Gillian's sort of holding her head here, but you know, it's a very real issue for a lot of our sort of members, and you know, particularly smaller businesses who've taken the time, who've had the energy to get into tourism. This is what we're trying to do, is to create new entrants, and they are vehicle based, and then just can't. It just becomes this absolute never-ending thing about you can't get a license. So you've got lease payments. You either operate illegally. We had one of our large operators who had struggled for 18 months to get a permit, and his permitting all came through, and literally 10 days after that he was involved, one of his vehicles, in a fatal accident with a British woman. And you know, thank goodness everything was in place. Had it not been, the damage to the destination is what's obviously a concern. And I know it's sort of slightly outside the ambit, but just, you know, any thoughts or guidance you might have on that, we'd be grateful for.
Gillian and Budalani, you meant to give me some prompters. What am I supposed to say? Answer to this question.
We're going to speak to Gillian afterwards.
No, I mean, it's you know, these are all of this tells you that the person who occupies the position of Minister of Tourism has to embrace a kind of all-of-government approach, or a whole-of-government approach, because to get tourism to achieve its maximum potential, you need cooperation of a number of departments. Home Affairs is one of them, transport is one of them, because there are aviation issues as well. Yeah. Public enterprises is another one of them, because we would like to see the resumption of the direct Mumbai to Johannesburg flight and other direct routes. So that's another point of contact, important point of contact. Police, very important point of contact. Oh, can I just digress a little bit, because you asked me some of the highlights. One of the highlights is just talking about police and the safety of tourists. Safety of tourists is something that I think I initiated the notion of the Working for Tourism program and safety monitors. So in the course of this last financial year, about 1,400 safety monitors have been recruited. They're currently being trained. And in partnership with a number of with provinces and institutions like Sandparks, and we'll be launching it formally on the 25th of April. So, but the connection and interaction with the police, Metro Police in certain cases, and the introduction of this entirely new program will hopefully start addressing that problem. So, but back to your question on transport. So that kind of contact with the Minister of Transport is critically important, because it's a big problem. And the big problem is that the incredibly long times that people wait for the applications to be approved, and for new vehicles to be approved, and so forth. I have not had a direct engagement with the Minister of Transport on this, but they did that. This engagement happened at a Deputy Minister level. But the better news, and more sustainably so, is that the TDCSA has been in direct contact with the Ministry of Transport, and the dialogue, the conversation is happening, and I think some of the backlog has been dealt with. Long way to go still, but I think the contact has been established, but we know that this has to be given the necessary push, because I think a lot of your members are in that business, and they're profoundly affected by unnecessary regulations, and I'll just end here by saying that when the President speaks about making the regulatory environment more tourist-friendly, or more business-friendly generally, it's not only visas. It's a number of unnecessary regulations, and we ourselves must be very careful. The revised Tourism Act, or the draft Tourism Amendment Bill, took a long time, frankly. But it's out there, and without going into the details of it, but talking about regulations, included in it is how we regulate, or the provision to regulate Airbnb, the so-called shared economy, etc. And it's to be gazetted, I think, this week, and so you should look at it and comment on it, because I think Airbnb is a reality, and there's a lot of resentment about Airbnb. The issue is not, you don't want to over-regulate tourism, but regulations are also necessary, because regulations are there to protect the integrity of our tourism sector, but also to protect consumers. So regulations are necessary, but appropriate regulations. So we've got to get this one right, and we hope that you'll help us get it right.
No, thanks, Minister. Then, looking forward, I mean, obviously I think that everybody has certainly felt a renewed sense of optimism under President Ramaphosa. I mean, it's been quite encouraging. But obviously, we've got elections coming up, and there's a political process that has to sort of take place within the ruling party. But coming out of it, and we know you're on the list. We're holding thumbs that you might crack the nod, and it would be great if there was some continuity, because obviously we could, in your own words, hit the ground running. But if you weren't the minister, what advice would you perhaps give to the person taking over from you? And is there a sense, given the noises we hear, so it's nice that the president in his State of the Nation talks about these targets, but a lot of our efforts sort of up to now, and even if you look at South African tourism's 5 and 5, this is all the what. This is what we could do. What we still thin on is the how, and consolidating that how, and if tourism is a priority sector, is there a sense of a creation of like and I mean, I don't mean to sort of characterize the term, but sort of a super ministry of tourism, or to elevate tourism where, we don't wait cap in hand for Home Affairs to give us the advisory, or we're not in the corridor waiting for transport to sort of, sort these things out. But this is the priority sector, this is where jobs are going to be created, and there's a bit of a whip that's cracked, and people are in a sense, working towards that goal of job creation and economic growth that tourism can deliver. But we can only do it if these other entities in government are sort of on side, so to speak. So a bit of a convoluted question, but just looking forward and how we could possibly structure and do things a little bit more differently going forward.
Now, for bald man, you're quite impressive, David. But the president can appoint 2 people who are not members of parliament to cabinet. I get the sense that you're lobbying that you get this position, Minister. More seriously, clearly it's going to be, and I think that message has gone out, it's going to be a smaller cabinet. There will be a reconfiguration of, how cabinet looks. I think the good news for tourism is that in the president's mind, he can see the potential of tourism. So, and it's been identified as one of the sectors that can help us get out of this kind of sluggish economy that we're in at the moment, and help us get back onto a good growth path with very high employment effects, which obviously is a priority. So it's already been elevated. It's already been given that status. I would guess that tourism might well be linked with some other ministry. We don't know that, but I can say that I'm absolutely confident that it'll have an importance, and I think that's the important thing. The advice that I would give to the next minister, well, let's get back to my position. I've been in cabinet and in and out of cabinet in parliament since 1994. At the end of every term, I never work on any assumption. If I'm on a list to go to parliament, that's where I'm going. I'm going to parliament, and if I happen to be appointed as a minister in cabinet, that's bonus. So at the very least, I'll be going to parliament once you vote me in when you exercise it. You got it? I'm joking. The advice that I would give to a next minister, and I work on the assumption that there will be a next minister, that he or she is not me, especially if she is a she, then I would say, firstly, that where I started, highlights of the 5 years, working with industry is critically important. That you've got an industry that really wants to work with government. We've got structures in industry that are very useful to work with, like the fact that you have your associations, the fact that we have an umbrella body for the associations. There is a kind of a tourism leadership forum that we established. So there are existing structures that the next minister can work with. Doesn't have to create the structures, they're there. So that would be my first advice. Work closely with industry. Industry will stand with you. That's my experience. Secondly, I would say, Minister, no, I wouldn't call it. I would say, hey, David, you have an ally. David being the next minister, you understand? Yeah. Because you're going to vote for his party, not my party. So I would say, David, I'm your ally. So no lone battle for David to make those advances in getting a more tourist-friendly visa regime, because I'm going to be a strong ally to that next minister. And so wherever I find myself, I can't walk away from this sector that I've grown to love. So wherever I find myself, I'm going to be there to support the next Minister of Tourism. And I would assure the next Minister of Tourism. And I would just give a little rundown of what the tourism sector strategy says. And for the rest, I say, over to you, baby. It's yours. It's yours. I'm here to support you.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think there's certainly, I think we had a South African Tourism board dinner with the Minister last night, and Enver Dumini from Cape Town Tourism was putting forward some very interesting ideas about, we've got to start looking at doing things differently. I think we've got ourselves into a position, the forward book doesn't look particularly good, and, just your views, Minister, as well, about, trying to sort of drive that through. I think there's a lot of energy and ideas in the private sector. But a lot of our destination marketing organizations are staffed by public servants. Given the historical legacy that we've got, many of those people have never worked in tourism. But our sort of model historically is we go to entities, SA Tourism or the provincial guys, and we expect them to be an answer to everything. They must come up with the solution. So for example, they must have a strategy for youth tourism. But there's nobody in SAT that's ever worked in youth tourism. They don't know that sector. And, or it may be on a provincial basis. We've seen this where Wesgro wasn't doing, there was a perception that they weren't doing a lot for the outlying areas. But there's a way, I think, of turning that around where we can make a lot of those strategies private sector driven, and not individual companies coming with self-interest, but a pie growing exercise where people collectively come together and say, the whole youth sector is so key. I think it's 36% of our overseas arrivals, between 18 and 34. We get them here, they're going to come back many times in their life. What is the strategy for that? And then to have our public sector entities support some of the private sector thought leadership. And you've initiated this with the whole China strategy, which I think has been incredibly interesting, that we do that collectively as the private sector together with SA Tourism and look forward. So, hopefully that, those types of models can be bedded down and taken forward into the future. Do you want to talk briefly a little bit about the China side? Because I think that's been an interesting sort of exercise and something that you've initiated and led.
Okay, but starting off with what you're talking about youth and again reflecting on the last 5 years, I think one thing that I've really got to appreciate, not that I haven't always thought that our country is spectacularly beautiful, it is, but I think just being in this sector and getting around, you kind of realize what a great destination we have, what a great offer we have. But the offer is not Table Mountain, and it's not just the fact that we have wildlife and we have these ecosystems and all of these things, the coastline, scenic beauty, but we've got great products within our destination. So there's a destination South Africa and lots of destinations in South Africa that make up the offer. So, and I think that's something that really struck me over the last 5 years. What incredible products we have in destination South Africa, including youth-friendly products. And I think that I would not have known. I mean, the backpackers that we've got, just fantastic, incredible backpackers. I've stayed in a couple of them. Yeah. I honestly think few countries can match us. So we are a very young person-friendly country, if you like. And, you know, we've got a little place called Paternoster. Little place called Paternoster with the best restaurant in the world. The whole wide world in a little place called Paternoster. Can you imagine? So we have fantastic stuff. China. I think you're right. Our numbers are flat, and on our big source markets like UK and Europe, we must continue giving them attention, hard attention, because a decline there is very serious. We have decline in our biggest source markets, very serious. But then we look at the potential growth markets, and the two big potential growth markets are China and India. China, I think the last figure for 2018 was something like 160 million Chinese travelers traveling abroad. It's massive. What did we get? What did we get in 2018? Less than 100,000. So it's been quite flat. You're right, we've had this really good exercise to say, what can we do to get a greater chunk, a greater share of this huge number of Chinese travelers? This has been a fantastic exercise. Because we've identified already a whole number of things that we can do on the visitor experience side, on the visa side, and on the marketing side. And I think we've got quite ambitious targets to get a greater share. India, the same thing. When I was in India a couple of months ago, met in Mumbai, met with about 80 industry reps. Some of you were there in India, or you've been there recently. And there are two things that came out. The safety concerns were not a big thing. By the way, the drought impacted many markets. Can I tell you the story, David? I mean, I got to Mumbai, and I swim when I can for a little bit of exercise. I go to the swimming pool in the hotel, and I sign for my towel. I've got to sign for my towel. And the guy there, the supervisor, says, "Oh, where are you from?" I say, "South Africa." I say, "Drought." Drought. Why? Because one of the cricketers went into a hotel and he sent a picture of the sign in the hotel. So we've got to be very, very careful about messaging. Friends, be very careful about messaging. So even with good intention, the day zero was not great messaging. It didn't help us in tourism. So, I mean, it's good that Cape Townians rose to the challenge because it was a crisis. But that message didn't really help us particularly. Where were we?
No, that's great.
China and India.
Yeah.
The industry representative said two things in China that they thought could make a huge difference. Visas and direct route from Mumbai to Johannesburg. So, I mean, when you've got it, it's right there. You don't have to do tons and tons of research. Just do those two things and the numbers follow. And then good marketing is just a bonus. But if you do good marketing and it's so difficult for people to come, your good marketing goes nowhere. Yeah. So that's why it's the package that counts. Good visitor experience, making it easier for people to come, and marketing it well. The package is what matters.
Great. Okay, well, look, just a final question from my side, and then we'll open it to the floor. I think there's certainly, just nice to broaden the conversation. I think there's some interesting questions. Always admired you as a person and as a politician in terms of that. And I think I just want to say for myself, very grateful that there are people of your integrity who had the ability to stand up and say what you needed to say at certain times, because it certainly changed, I think, the political trajectory of the country. But looking forward, Minister, your outlook for South Africa generally, and where just as a final sort of commentary, where do you think we're going? Where do you think we're going to emerge after the elections? And what is your, what's your vision?
Well, I mean, it's sort of self-evident that we found ourselves in a bad space as a country. I think the good news is that we're navigating our way out of that bad space, and that it's very transparent, and that perhaps the people that stand the most to be embarrassed and by these commissions that have been appointed, because we demanded, we said the truth must come out. And the truth is coming out, and it's an uncomfortable truth for many people. Could be an uncomfortable truth for the party that I come from. It could be an uncomfortable truth for other people who are not from my party, but it must come out. And so I think just a few things in this relatively short period. The appointment of the commission is very important because truth has to come out and it has to be dealt with. The fact that it's so transparent, that it's in the public eye, good news. Good news. The appointment, good appointments to SARS, South African Revenue Service, very good appointment. Good appointment as the Director of Public Prosecutions. So what you're seeing now is bit by bit the pieces being put in place that can restore confidence in our economy and confidence in our country. And so I think we're getting out of the bad space into a better space. I've had opportunity to interact with business people at quite a high level. I went to the investment summit, and you know, the investment confidence isn't quite where it should be, but there's a growing investment confidence. There are investment pledges. So I personally, and I'm not saying it just to defend President Ramaphosa, I'm really optimistic that we'll get ourselves out of the bad space into a much better space.
Great. Well, very encouraging to hear. And just we're going to open it to the floor, and anybody who's got a question, please feel free. We've got some roving mics. Please just identify yourself and just say, you know, who you are and where you from. Should we take one and you just answer, or do you want to take a couple on it? Maybe it's better just to do one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to write anything down, remember. Aidan, you want to kick off?
Good day, Minister. I'm Aidan Lawrence. I'm the Marketing Committee Chairperson for SATEC. And we've been doing, over the last 3 months, we've been doing a lot of work in getting our youth tourism online presence very good. And it's been great. But what we have noticed is when we're comparing our site to I Love South Africa or hashtag Meet South Africa or Short Left. Our site has 3,000 people on it, and we are reaching 10,000 people per week. SouthAfrica.net has put out I Love South Africa, and that site, that Facebook page, has 130,000 people on it, and it's reaching 15,000 people. Now, how is a tiny little site like ours, for whatever, getting almost as much reach as something that we are paying taxpayer money to, millions, for a team to run that site? Then we got the short left site. 450,000 people are on that site, and they're reaching 5,000 people. It should be reaching millions of people. And that to me just says that we, as tourism and as South Africa, because we are just as responsible, aren't actually telling or aren't actually bringing up these points to government. We're not comparing these things actively enough and saying, hey, what's going on here? So, to me, how do we find a platform to interact with government and say, we really need you to do a better job because this is affecting brand South Africa. And Nigeria is doing 10 times better than us. Their page has 250,000 interactions. So that's my question.
Yeah. Well, the audience loves your question. So, and next question. No, what I thought I would do is I would deflect your question to the representative of the SA Tourism Board who is sitting right next to me over here.
On the trip.
Yeah. David.
No, noted. One of our more active and, you know, and it's great to have this level, you know, the stuff that Aidan and the guys in his neck of the woods are doing. I think this is precisely the conversation we need to have with SAT, and we need to improve these areas. I mean, this is...
How do we get more young people onto those social media teams? You know, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
How do we get more young people onto these social media teams?
I don't have the answer to that, but I'm going to go to SAT because they should have an online.
This minister's useless.
Fire him already. No, but we certainly will. It's something we'll take up with SA Tourism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ilana, do you want to get in your?
Yeah, this one's on.
G'day, Minister. Harold Franken, I'm chairperson for the Limpopo Provincial Tourism Association. So we started about 3 years ago with 4 tourism associations in Limpopo. Currently we've got 14 in 40 municipalities, still 11 to go, 600 members, and we're doing it all for free. Anyway, but we're growing, and I've just been sending to all our members questions. They must send me the questions from Limpopo. So number one, a huge thank you for the I Do Tourism Award for TASA that you gave last year. We're very proud about our community homestays. Through that, we are now starting in Palaborwa, Mashishi, Mali, another community-based homestay project. The 2 questions that came through from them was, number one, we've got a lot of investment in terms of tourism from the Chinese market. We've had a few delegations up in Limpopo. We've had some sheikhs flying into Polokwane. They bought some farms up there. The problem that the people are asking, and grassroots cultural people, is what is tourism going to do to protect their livelihood, to protect the culture of Limpopo? Because they're scared we might be selling our soul for foreign investment. So that's the one question. So we need to keep the authenticity and heritage of our province and, say, our country as well. And number 2, a week and a half ago I had the privilege, nay, the honor, to travel on Prosa from Cape Town to Johannesburg. And on the train there were 5 couples, foreign couples with us, Germany and all of them. I'm the type of person I would walk up to you and say who I am and what are you doing and where are you going. By the time we reached Wellington, 5 hours delay, train broke. They all took a shuttle back to Cape Town to fly up to Joburg and said never again. We ended up actually getting off in Kimberley on a bus, no aircon, and anyway, long story short, it's not your main concern, but I want to say what my wife said is, tourism sometimes has their head stuck in the sand and not looking at contributing factors that can affect tourism. So what I wanted to ask, and what is coming out, is what can we do in terms of communication between other departments? And I know you're doing an amazing job in terms of that, but just better communication between transport, between our airlines, between everything that affects tourism. Because although some people don't know, tourism is the way forward for South Africa. And if we close all the other sectors, tourism will carry our country forward. So thank you very much for this opportunity as well.
Quite a mouthful, but as you said, I mean, you have no nervousness about going up to a person and starting to talk to a person, but let's start off with your train experience. I mean, clearly we're a country with our own imperfections, and we've got to work on them. We've got to get these things better. We've got to get our infrastructure better, let alone our electricity challenges that we have in our country, which nobody has mentioned. They're big ones. But we also have a robust rail. We also have a blue train. So these are, again, South African products that are fabulous. And they work. They run well. Blue train is actually a state-owned product, and robust rail is not. But they work, and they're great. I think you're touching on 2 things, and David might want to add. And one thing that David is pushing for, and some other board members are as well, is the strengthened interface between SA Tourism, government, and the industry. And so getting it beyond where we've taken it to, so that SA Tourism not only kind of reports its activities to the industry, but I think David was saying, share your plans, engage with your plans. So that strengthened sort of nexus and interface between, these state bodies, whether they're marketing agents or the Department of Tourism and the industry. I think that's critical. Secondly, responsible tourism. He was saying, well, what if these things start threatening our, sort of our heritage, our environment, our culture, and if they become intrusive, and they can. I think we are doing pretty well as a country in promoting and doing responsible tourism, but we can do a lot better. So I think that's the message, that we don't only, it's not only we do tourism, you disagree, we're not doing that.
The question would be, is that if foreigners are buying the land, how do you make sure that they are doing responsible tourism?
Yeah, but it's not only foreigners buying the land, it's we must do responsible tourism. Whoever is the tourism player, whether it's a person from another country or a person from our country, doesn't really make a difference. We've got to make sure that we promote and insist on responsible tourism. So that includes, and we had great award winners yesterday, by the way.
Yeah.
And Groot Bos, our mutual friend, was the overall award winner for the African Awards, because they're doing incredible things with the community. So it's about environmental responsibility, social responsibility, working with communities, good workplace, good labor practice. And so I think that's what we want out of our tourism sector. We want to not only say we grow tourism, but doing responsible tourism helps grow tourism. But it means that the things that you depend on, like the environment that we depend on, that in growing tourism and in doing tourism, we're looking after the very things that we depend on. And to give an example of the important nexus and the interface, if our rhino population declines and if the rhinos go extinct, which they won't, we've got 80% of the world's white rhinos live in South Africa, reside, or whatever you call it, without ID documents or anything, but we have them. And so our conservation track record is a very good one, but poaching is a very real problem. The fact of the matter is that it's the revenue generated through tourism that allows the conservation efforts to increase. It's private operators that have increased the amount of conservation land that we have in South Africa. So tourism can be very, very good for the environment, but tourism can also be damaging to the environment. Our job is to increase that kind of consciousness and to promote in whatever way we can, promote good practice and promote responsible tourism. David, I'm sure you want to add.
No, not much, Minister. I mean, I just think the encouraging thing is that there is some level of investment interest. I think that allows subsequent conversations to happen. It's when you have nobody investing, then it's a fairly pyrrhic and unexciting conversation. So I think we need to engage in terms of the people coming in and see what we can do in terms of broadening those benefits.
Yeah, on that note, just,
do you want to introduce yourself and just, sorry if you don't mind.
My name is Catherine. I'm from Panthera Africa Big Cat Sanctuary in Stanford. So talking about rhinos and the wildlife, talking about foreign investment from the Chinese market. As you know, the lions are also a very big issue and a topic, also with poaching, but also with the illegal trade, with the bone trade. And we know that there's a lot of factories and so forth being done by both South Africans, but also by the foreign market going to the Asian market. Is this something that the tourism and also the government is concerned about, or also at least it's a topic that is a focus?
Just explain that a bit better.
Yeah, so this is my English. So, but with regards to the investments that we want, so in South Africa it's great with foreign investments. But also people are coming in with not always the purest intention. Is that a focus to kind of, the illegal wildlife trade is a huge concern. And yes, it's good with foreign investment, but it's also a big topic for this industry.
Yes, I'm going to repeat what I said. People come into South Africa sometimes without good intention, but there are many South Africans that don't have good intention.
Exactly, that's what I mean. It's the
Right.
combination of that. So yeah, but I just wonder if it's a focus point. Of,
Yeah. You know what? There's somebody behind you that I think just wants to add to the question before we respond. Oh, different question. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. What I want to say first is that it's a great honor from. Is it working? Okay, thank you. Okay. I've been looking forward to meet you. And Prime Minister, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Tabatani, my surname is Shaka. I'm from Eastern Cape. I'm named Chagatos. What I want to say is that, and then I need your assistance. I can be happy if you can do that. Because what is more painful is that...
I wonder, sorry, we were just talking about this, sort of illicit wildlife trade. So only if your question is related to that, otherwise we can deal with it as the next question.
No, it's not related.
It's not related?
Yes.
Let's deal with that one first then, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind.
Okay. It's obviously we and must be part of a whole international network to deal with illegal wildlife trade. And we are playing quite a prominent role in that through our Department of Environmental Affairs. So it's not only poaching, but it's illegal dealing with ivory or rhino horn, etc. I had the pleasure of being the acting Minister of Environmental Affairs for a period, but it goes beyond that. So, firstly, let's intensify our own anti-poaching activities. Let's make sure that we do the right things to prevent our own people from connecting with other people and taking our animal products and trading with them illegally. So there are certain legislative things that we need to do. We've got these, we allow, for example, domestic trade in rhino horn. It serves absolutely no purpose because you can't sell that rhino horn. But we allow domestic trade for what? People buy a rhino horn in order to take it somewhere else, or in order to sell it eventually. So we allow domestic trade in rhino horn. It makes no sense. So we've got to strengthen our internal legal requirements and our policies that will contribute to the effective combating of illicit trade in animal products in different ways. But I'm sort of adding to your question, if you like. I think the way we deal with the whole human-animal interface is very important. And I think you are doing good work in that regard. During that period, I also appointed a panel that would really examine, because it's a big issue, the issue of animal handling, the issue of lions, and there's an organization called Blood Lions, etc. And these are not these are important lobby groups that are raising very important issues. And I think we need to come to some kind of a consensus, because some of your members, or members of TBCSA, are in the hunting game, in the hunting business. Hunting creates a lot of jobs. But what hunting should be allowed and what hunting shouldn't be allowed? What kind of hunting? What kind of animal keeping should be allowed? What kind of animal handling should be allowed? So I think these are questions that were meant to have been addressed by that very panel.
Yeah.
And so I think these are real serious issues that will require attention over the next 5 years, because it could, sort of wrong practice could very negatively affect our country profile and our country brand.
Yeah, great. I mean, that SATS animal interaction process has been fascinating. I mean, for those of you who've attended, firstly, the level of ignorance in South Africa about the view that the world's taking of us.
Yeah.
So people have taken a view on us, whether we like it or not. The third most asked question on TripAdvisor, you can go and Google it. Firstly is what's to do in South Africa. Then it's something about the sort of Kruger. The third question is about animal interactions and and what goes on.
Really?
I think the sixth one's about corrupt traffic cops and everything, but that's another story. But the process is that the first world's taken a view on this, but in a way it's a colonial view, because we need to come up with our own view, which is a South African set view that balances. Balances the sort of issues around ethical behaviour with employment, sort of etc. And it's been really interesting because in the consultative workshops, because this is put as a proper consultative process where you get into workshops and you've got bloodline people with the sort of line park people in the same room, and everybody believes that they're doing good. I always say I liken it to 1545 in England, and he's a Lutheran, cut his head off, he's a Catholic, burn him at the stake, but we all love baby Jesus. It's a similar sort of issue, but I think that what we are going to come out of it with is a tourism solution, and it will be based on strong ethics and what's right, and at the end of the day, nobody's holding a gun to anybody's head to say you have to be accredited or join. But if you do sign up for it, your chances of getting business from the organised tourism industry is quite high. If you choose to be outside of it, well, take your chances. But if we can get this right, we can actually go to the world with a sense of confidence and a sense of pride. And as we understand it, we're the only destination that's actually doing this. So elsewhere in the world, the sort of supply side, the people sending people, the Dutch operators, APTA have taken a view. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation as we emerge with guidelines and possibly a sense of accreditation to actually go and market this and take it back to the world and share it with other destinations.
Yeah, and I think what we should be striving to is have good practice in many areas. And I have a true confession to make if you all promise not to tell anybody. I have stroked a cheetah. It's the most amazing feeling, and cheetahs don't roar, they purr. But it's wrong. I loved it, and I didn't realize it was wrong at the time. But these are things that we really have to apply mind to. And if people love to play with little lions and little lion cubs and things like that, it's wrong. But yeah. Amandla. The gentleman with the hat, I don't know, protecting you against the sun.
Yeah, I will do that.
Can you introduce yourself, sir?
Yes, okay. I'm Tabatani Chak, and then I'm running Chagatos from Eastern Cape in Montfletch. So it is a great honor for me to meet you firstly, because I really wanted to meet you at some stage, and then it just happened to meet you. Just to be in short, I'm just here to represent our town. I think I started to do tourism in 2006, and then I've discovered the biggest rock art site in South Africa. As I was going through my community, establishing CTOs, talking to people and then the headmen. And then some other guy took me to this rock painting, and then I've tried to call some archaeologists that I know. So there are many archaeologists that have came to our area, and then they said that no, this is the biggest rock art site in South Africa. And then they made a document that we must submit it to our municipality. And then our municipality, the LED manager said that no, this thing, Tabatani, it won't work. And then it won't bring tourists in. And then Abala said, look, even in our coat of arms, there are Bushman paintings there, which shows that these paintings are of importance. And then there was nothing that was done by that. But what I'm happy of is that they documented it on their Bushno magazine, which is the official newsletter of our municipality. And then again, discovered the highest point in Eastern Cape, which is called Kwadoma. It's 3,019 meters above sea level. So what is interesting about it is that when you punch your GPS coordinates there, it appears on GPS the prison number of Nelson Mandela. And then it also falls under the 9 peaks of South Africa. And then it is not known. Still, there is nothing that is happening about these areas to be marketed and then to be known. And number three, I rented a space which is called the Transito building where I'm situated. I started tourism information center. The building falls under municipality. And then we are supposed to pay 100 rand per month. And then I've tried to renovate the area, to plant grass, to plant trees and lawn. And then now, I think I'm owing 1.6. But I say to them, guys, instead of supporting me, you said that I must rent. And then I'm trying to promote tourism here on this area. And then I think you were supposed to help me, and then we were supposed to make a joint venture, and then let us do this thing together. And then there is nothing happening. But what I want to say here is that the only people that are helping us is Eastern Cape Park tourism agents. They are the one that they brought me here, and then they did on previous events like the Indaba and the Belt. So, but there is nothing that is happening from our municipality. And
sorry, which municipality is that?
The district is Jokar. The local is Elundi.
Yeah.
Yes. So, another thing that is happening is that...
No, I think we've got you.
Okay, let me finish off.
Specific things, yeah. Okay.
Pardon?
No, I'm saying, these are quite specific, detailed things. I want to suggest, affecting your municipality and what they are supporting you and not supporting you on. We've got Budulani over here. I want you, because we need the detail. You can give that last example, but it doesn't help if you give many examples of things that are not working as they should work.
Okay, I think let me just finish off. Yes. Okay, lastly is that when I come here, I just need someone who's going to assist us in terms of marketing our area and make our area to be known, and then to make us, the village, to know the importance of tourism, because at some stage, another thing that is that our town is very dirty so that it doesn't attract tourists. So if you are referring me to Bulelani, I think Bulelani must supposed to do anything, not just to keep quiet. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
Ladies. Okay, thank you. Hi, Minister and David, everyone. So my name is Benji Wilson. I'm co-owner of a Siapambile Expeditions, which is a private customized tour company based in Bloemfontein. This is not so much a question, but I will have one, but a little bit observation. Also looking back at your tenure and to the future, and you highlighted very well with that trip to Mumbai. So instead of focusing internally, one aspect of tourism with international visitors is their perspective or perception of South Africa. So when you're showing a picture of you from South Africa and it says drought. So coming across people, especially from America, Europe, the perception of South Africa is sometimes unbelievable. The highlight, of course, is crime. Most of the time when you speak to someone, they ask you, is it safe in South Africa? From personal experience, I've born here, lived my whole life here. I spent only 2 years in Holland and had crime mugged more times than my whole life here in South Africa. That's in Holland, first world country. So the question is, what does the department, I suppose, do in terms of changing that perspective? And a lot of it comes from the media, because you have one drought in Cape Town, and now, South Africa, no water. There was that issue of the couple from the UK in KZN who got murdered, I think, elderly couple. So now that's one of our biggest markets, and they give us a terrorism advisory for this one couple when millions of UK tourists are coming here successfully and loving it. So yeah, that's the question in terms of the perception externally into South Africa.
Say something about it, Minister.
I mean, I don't think we should pretend that crime isn't a problem in South Africa. It's a very, very big problem. But I think what we need to do is to more effectively fight crime. But there are perceptions that are also wrong. Because most of the places that tourists go to are actually, by any world standards, are really safe. So go to the beaches that are close to the cities and not so close to the cities. Compared to the beaches of Rio de Janeiro, our beaches are a lot safer than the Rio de Janeiro beaches. Go to our national parks, go on the garden route, go to Cape Point, go to the waterfront, go to Sandton, but there are places that are dangerous. And there are places in other countries that are dangerous as well. But I think this notion that, South Africa is an unsafe place to come to, yes, you're right. We've got to send out a more positive message. And so single incidents do impact in New Zealand, which is, by most international standards, quite a safe country. But it was a British tourist who was murdered in New Zealand not so long ago. And now we've just had the attack on the mosque in New Zealand, which is very unfortunate. I think the way the Prime Minister, communicated and reacted was great. But these things happen. I think we should say, thankfully, South Africa has been spared of any of these kinds of terrorist attacks, which have happened in Paris, they've happened in Cairo, they've happened in where was it Morocco, Tunisia, not that long ago, and Sharm el-Sheikh. Istanbul. So we've had attacks all over the world. We've been spared of that sort of thing. But we must work harder to keep, that's exactly why we're introducing the Tourism Safety Monitor program, is to not only have the already safe places remain safe, but to have other places where tourists are a bit more vulnerable, like the hiking trails, for example, keep them safe as well. Keep our beaches safe. There are some beaches that are very safe, and other beaches that are not so safe. But for the moment, I think we should counter the wrong message, the wrong narrative that South Africa is an unsafe place for tourists to come to.
No, absolutely, and I think when you look at the research that comes out of SAT generally, is that there's generally quite a high awareness of South Africa, but that drops off quite dramatically to actually converting to getting people here. In my mind, what we do is sort of essentially in our own self-deprecating way, under-promise, but we over-deliver. So once people are here, 99.9% of tourists don't see any crime. So they go away absolute fans. And we've got one of the highest repeater rates in the world. Mm-hmm. What we haven't done, and this is one of the ideas to take into SA tourism and work with the private sector, let's unlock our repeater value. So people who've come here are going to go away as fans. They're going to sit at dinner tables and show photographs and tell people this is the best place they've been to. The value is phenomenal. All of this stuff, and we're not harnessing that. So we sort of get them here, they slip through our fingers, they go back home, and then we try and get more first-timers here. So we obviously need to carry on doing that, but there's a massive mine of people who've been here that we can speak to, that we need to have conversations with, because they've overcome the hump. And then I think the other thing that I also, getting back to Aidan's thing, is let's look at the millennials. Let's look at people who have whose sort of negative perception threshold is lower. So if you're generally a little bit older and you're a bit more haverig, but if you're young and more intrepid, and maybe unlocking our whole adventure segment so that you come here for adventure, this is an adventurous place, but let's come and do adventure in South Africa as your main activity rather than coming for a general holiday and doing a sort of bungee. So I think there's some proactive things we can do, because we're not going to solve the whole security situation in the short term. I mean, we need to work at it, but we need to just work around it smartly, I think. Yeah, two more.
Hi, Jackie Pollock, Cape Exec Exclusive Tours. I'm a wheels operator, so I'm going to take us back to the question of wheels, and I see my colleague Pam is over here as well. We have similar problems, and so what I wanted to offer was potentially some suggestions and solutions. I wonder whether the Road Transportation Board has ever been on a tour, because we seem to be conflated with taxis. is there anybody here, and would it be a conflict of interest for somebody based in Pretoria to perhaps offer them a tour so they can see what it is we do and why what we do is not in any way threatening or linked to any number of other issues related to organised crime, as the news would have us believe. Does anybody agree that that might be an option? I just feel also that a lot of the various sectors that lead into what ultimately becomes the tourism banister don't really pay that much attention to the quality of the people that they have doing the work, and are probably entirely under-resourced as well. Is there any way in which you could have any sway within departments like transport and whatever else, you mentioned a couple of others, like immigration, your first point of arrival, and you get this guy that's jumping you through hoops unnecessarily just because he can. Is there any way that that message can go out? We actually need people who are well-trained and also are well-resourced in order to deal with this, because if you want to change a vehicle, you have to wait, I don't know how many months at the moment. That's not even for a new vehicle application. It used to take 48 hours when they were based in Cape Town. Why should that be so difficult now? Okay. So, any suggestions from the floor? Bring it back to Cape Town. Could that message be taken back?
Yeah, I mean, I think
the issuing of licenses worked here in Cape Town. Since it's gone to Pretoria, it doesn't work. And I just don't think there's the same dedication to getting the job done.
Okay. I mean, I think it's related to the earlier question on public transport and the National Public Transport Regulator. There is a regulator, there's a board. I think there is this kind of interaction. Yes, there's sometimes not a clear distinction between what is a taxi and a tour operator. And yes, I think you should invite the next Minister of Transport to take a fabulous tour around South Africa so she understands, or she, what tours are about and the importance of this kind of, the tour operations to the tourism sector. But I think we kind of dealt with the question earlier on to say it's being dealt with. There is a serious discussion happening with the regulator, with the board, and the Ministry of Transport, and it must continue.
Johan.
Yeah, no, we're painfully aware of that, and I think we said that the time that is the problem. That's exactly why we're in this discussion with them, because we are very aware of the problem. What we want now from them is solutions to the problem. It's a big problem, but that's exactly what this contact is about, and I think that the TBCSA itself is in contact with the regulator.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately what members are the frustration is that they're having a series of workshops. So national workshops are being held where members are coming along, having to take a day out of their work to come and tell the people the same problem that they documented 18 months ago. And possibly it's not moving as quickly as we can, but we can take that back through the TBCSA and we'll work it. So this, guys, I mean, we've noted it. It's still a major problem. But Johan, you want to talk to us about adventure, I would imagine.
The last question for the day. Afternoon, Minister and David, and I'm sure David knows where I'm heading with this question. What I want to say is I promise to vote for your party if we can get the adventure regulation back on track.
Well, okay, we'll do that. Yeah.
Seriously, adventure needs a little bit of attention. We started with the process, but it did get derailed a while you took your sabbatical. So hopefully we can get it back on track after the elections.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, I mean, Johan, as you know, we have got the nod from the Collaborative Fund, which is the ring-fenced Thompson money. We're just in the process of getting the corporate governance sorted out in terms of how how anybody would apply for funding and funds would be dispersed, because we've got to do that. We can't just sort of do this on the back of a cigarette box. But you guys are in the front of the queue. Adventure tourism is in the front of the queue. That should be sorted out within the month. And later this year, we hopefully to get that whole adventure self-regulation program and the marketing component up and running, because I think it's one of our sleeping giants.
So it's not being driven from the national department side, but it's going to be driven.
Yeah, that's going to be driven through the collaborative fund, but it'll be done in partnership. I mean, it's just that in terms of actually getting the show on the road, that's where the funding conduit will come from.